Hello. Nice to meet you guys. Is anyone know anything about Counter-Strike here? Yes? Yes? Few people, nice. So, where to go after Counter-Strike Go? It's what it's meaning, I think, there. So right now it's a new version of Counter-Strike, was released last year. KS2. Okay, how's you guys dealing with this? We have a different side of esports industry. How is for you right now, new version of Counter-Strike?
Me? Hi. Sure, let's talk Counter-Strike. Maybe I, for a second, say who I am. I don't know. My name's Anne. It's really tough to hear anything in here, so we're probably going to be asking a lot of what, and please repeat that. Apologies for that. So I lead esports at Team Vitality. For those who don't know, that's an esports organization. And, well, we've played the last CSGO event or major in Paris that we ended up winning.
Yeah, for you it's probably
yes, that was very nice. And we have since been competing in Counter-Strike 2. It was, honestly, I think it was made much bigger of a thing than it was in reality for us. Not a lot changed on day to day. Sure, the gameplay changed a little bit. Yes, there were some updates in the beginning. It was a bit wonky in terms of, stability on events. But how we approach the game operationally has not changed. And then how it has not changed for us either is that it's still a major, a core title, or a tier 1 title, or whatever you want to call it, an important title, where we're very much focusing our funding on, where we are putting our sponsorship against, and where also the performance matters a lot. So our marketing, our spending, everything revolves around it. So to make the ramble really short, not a lot changed. We are still really believing in it, and we're going to continue with the focus on it as we did before. But maybe the other esports
maybe
team...
change for anybody else. How's for your sides?
From our side, we actually worked probably quite closely on this and had conversations as two TOs of that's a non-competitive issue of how we understand a new version of a game and implement it. So we were speaking fairly regularly in the months leading up to its release of when do we think it's going to be released, which tournaments would we, between us, switch to, so we can give Anne and others, and yourself, Vlady, clarity at teams to know what you're planning for. So we had a tournament that was just after, about 2 weeks after the game was released, the full showdown, I think it was last year, and we carried on and played Go on that because we didn't feel we knew enough of the technical implications and our esports ops teams didn't understand how well we could implement any of the tweaks or rules. So we then said to teams like, look, we won't play that. That caused some consternation from some teams, but said we will play from this tournament on so that we gave a clarity of knowing when they can plan to and we can build out our structures for.
Yeah, I'd pretty much say it's very similar in the sense of the transfer over was like, I think 3 tournaments after the announcement, everyone was like, this is the last CSGO tournament. And then it kept being the last CSGO tournament and then the last CSGO tournament because we were kind of stuck in an in-between, a bit of limbo. But I think the transfer over was quite simple. I think our team handled it really well with how we looked at things. And I think still we look at the game and evaluate it and how we see it. But yeah, from an ESL FACEIT side, I'd probably say the part that we did really strongly on was we also have the matchmaking system with FACEIT as a platform, that our team managed to switch that over very quickly as well and sort of integrating CS2 into that because it changes the whole matchmaking platform that we run alongside our tournaments. So I'd say that's the only variety probably in the 2 areas, but yeah, I don't think there was too much impact.
Yep, I guess I'll go. I'll do a quick intro. So I'm Octavio Echeagaray from Liga Esports. We're an organization based in Mexico, but we mainly focus in all Latin America. Some games like Counter-Strike, all of America. So for us, how it has changed, I mean, we've seen a lot more interest of teams and a lot more events. And I mean, next year is a great example of so many more events, so many more teams, so many other organizers doing. For us, we're mainly an organization that feeds into the big other organizations. So we've been working with Blast for 3 years now, but we did the RMR with them. We did the RMR for PGL and our own IP, also the Ace Masters. We have seen so many more, not only in our events, but also the game has each time more and more and more players, which is going to lead into more events and better players and better teams coming up.
Okay, overall, not much change, but at the same time, there is some changes in round format. How it's affected also tournaments, how it's affected team preparation, how it's affected maybe viewership.
As a TO, we were quite excited by the shorter matches. It gives us, I think there's a greater intensity in the product. You see less kind of saved rounds, or you see there's constantly more action. I think that's great. I think in a world where we spend far too much time discussing formats, and certainly people wanting more matches and more robustness in a tournament structure, if you've got a format that is now able to play a best of 3 but's taken an hour off that means you can probably sustainably fit more matches in. We can probably plan. You've both been at times when you might have been match 4 in a day with us or Mike, and you're waiting around for then a variance of 2 hours. If that is less variance, that's better for everybody, I would assume, to plan and operate to. But that's from an operator and a broadcaster's side rather than teams and playing.
Yeah, spoken like a true TO. No, I think on the entertainment side, on the operational side, I think there's a lot of plus points to this, and you can't disregard that. So if I wear the business hat and I look at this, I think this is a really good move. We've seen it also in other FPS games. We've had it before, and I think, yeah, having it more concise, more action, everything matters more, every round matters more. You can't faff around for 5 rounds before you warm up. Great. Also, yes, the late games, all these things, even if there are tech pauses or whatever, you don't go in these huge, huge long matches where suddenly you're at 25 rounds and you're like, Jesus. On the competitive side, personally, I think from our team perspective, we don't love it as much. I mean, we've adapted. Everybody had to, so it's fair. There's no competitive difference. Speaking from Vitality, we are a team that sometimes needs a couple rounds to wake up, so it's not that great for us. However, if I may say so,
Specifically within best of 1, yeah?
Yeah, right. But you win some, you lose some, and I think it doesn't change anything bottom line. You just got to adapt and do it the right way. And the really good teams should be able to do just that, right? So.
I can go. I think it's very well said. And as a player, I used to be a player many years ago. So as a player, I would not like that change, right? You want more rounds. You want more rounds to have more chance to catch up, to do the comeback, and to ultimately have the best team win. But yeah, as a TO, I completely agree with Andrew. You want it to be a bit shorter so you can go
But at the same
first.
time, if it's like your game is so long and you need to play like 2 more matches, for example, during one day, would it be better for you or worse?
In the end, I know if you have to play like several times in a day, it's gonna be worse, right? But you normally, in the end parts of the event, you end up playing 1 match a day, and you want that match to be the best as possible. But I do think it's better in general for the ecosystem and for the players and for the tournaments and for the audience to not have to watch really long games. So in general, I think it's positive to make the shorter games, but it's important to see it as in all perspectives, right? As TO, as a player, as the audience, and everything else.
Yeah, I think just generally with the release of the new game, I think there's going to be lots of teething issues. I think if anyone was around in Counter-Strike back in 1.6 and transferred over to Go, there was the exact same process. I'd actually probably say now, if we're looking at how we are in the current ecosystem, that it's probably gone much smoother than it did back then, because everyone saw 1.6 as the game to go to, and Go was never going to lift off. And then we look 10 years down the line, we're in a much better situation. So I think there was lots of excitement when it got announced and everything there. And I think there was excitement from the community about a new game coming in and new mechanics. Just generally, yeah, I think there's always going to be teething issues for things and how we look at things, and we're always going to monitor it. I think from a scheduling side, we run things quite differently between our tournaments, and we're evaluating how we look at that from an ESG side. But yeah, I think there's a promising future, and it's like quite exciting still to look into.
What is the lack in this version? What we would like to add to this version to make Counter-Strike better?
Sorry, can you repeat that loud.
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 What you would like to improve in Counter-Strike?
In the game or in the industry?
Everything.
Everything.
We're talking about everything.
Wow, how much time the number there, we have that
like
time?
48
Guys,
minutes.
I can
think we
make a
can
list
stop
for the
early.
next 48 minutes if you want to. Maybe I start, I don't know why I'm starting. Well, I don't know. I think we can talk a little bit, because it says where to go after go. Sure, let's talk more CS2. Next year, big changes, right? Like specifically talking industry, talking TO, talking leagues. So that's not so much in-game, but very much more
About structure.
structure, revenue, leagues, formats, calendar. If I had an open wish to give to Valve, it's that maybe one day they will be more actively involved, not just in the ranking, which, by the way, I think is a really cool thing that they're doing, but that they help us navigate the scheduling nightmare that we're currently living. I mean, Andrew, do you want to talk about the RMR? No, just kidding. But no, so my wish would be to have schedules more announced in the future with more clarity, and to have an ecosystem where everyone is sustainable. So where the TOs are not struggling to pay their bills and don't have to pay out insane minimum guarantees that they can't live up to, but that we have the media rights to back that up, to then share said revenue with the teams to just also be able to pay the ever-increasing salaries and just not live in this bubble, but live on a sustainable long-term level. I do think we're slowly developing in that direction. But my wish would be if I could just, do one, be like, hey, tomorrow we all wake up and that problem's solved and, it's happy days. But then it would also be very boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but we need to make a wish first. So you're making it.
I don't know. Maybe you guys agree or disagree to my wish, but yeah.
I can't give all your wishes. I think it's quite exciting going into next year. Obviously, there are changes that Valve have put in place, and generally they are a hands-off developer compared to some of the other titles that we work in and that you play in. So it's a very different model, and actually they don't dip their hands in very often. When they do, would I like them to do it slightly differently? Probably, but I think, almost to your point, Anna, I think more longer-term thinking and clarity from them is useful. Like, I know we've had conversations when we pushed with them to say even like get a major bidding process for 2 or 3 years out, because that's the kind of timelines us and other TOs need to look at the venues and the cities we want to be in for big majors. That isn't something that you turn around in a year's time and go, oh, can I have this incredible venue? Or like, no, that's booked up by Taylor Swift or whoever else that's coming into town. So them understanding that they're part of a global entertainment industry rather than just a gaming industry. So having that future horizon, even if what they want to do isn't necessarily what I want, or what you would want, or what a team would want, I'd rather know what it is, and then we can plan to that and build out. Which, to their credit, in the changes they're putting in place for next year, they've given us 18 months notice essentially on that, and we've all been working around the clock to sort of build out new structures. We'll be sharing tomorrow our plan for 25, what the new world looks like, how our tournaments work, and the financial mechanisms for that. So that's really exciting. We'll be announcing some incredible destinations as well, but being able to give TOs that longer term planning time frame, I think it will be chaotic next year. The calendar issue is a challenge. I think that sometimes other people have to take responsibility for that. There's plenty of tournaments they don't have to people play that they perhaps choose to. Some of that is because people want to go hunting money, understandable. Sometimes by Valve having a cleaner ranking structure and perhaps route into the majors, which ultimately are still the biggest prizes out there, that will allow teams to maybe plot events more sustainably for them to play. Hopefully, selfishly, they're my events they're playing. I'm sure you'll say the same about yours. But that's what we want to try and create, is a longer-term path to build a sustainable future for all of us.
I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head. Like, looking back, we see it as an improvement that we would like to see, but to see it in the last few years as well of the improvement that we are getting to, I think we can see it already being identified that the industry is progressing. We are catching up a little bit with other types of entertainment industries and such things. So but I think you've hit the nail on the head already from our perspective.
Just to add a bit on our side, I mean, we don't have that direct contact as Blast or ESL has with Valve, but I think in general, I mean, the ranking is a great system. It's been a great job with the current bans recently and stuff, like keeping the game very competitive, making the best players, and making it a reason to go in and having the best game to play in there. On the ranking side, we're more focused on, I mean, not the very top teams, but whatever comes after 32 to 100, right? Giving more opportunities to other teams to rank up and get invited to the top events, and opening up the ecosystem to more TOs. It's great. I think that so many more TOs are going to get the chance to do their own event. I mean, it's more opportunity for us to work with more TOs. So in general, I think it's the changes are very positive from our side, at least.
Do you think it's good for Counter-Strike, or it will burn out everybody, because we'll have too many events next year, and players will need to catch up all the time for ranking, all the time playing events without non-stop, because you will be afraid to lose some opportunity and then lose the ranking and then lose the opportunity to perform in a major.
Yep. I didn't really hear the full question, but what I heard, I will answer. I think having that many events will make also teams have to sit out some events and create more opportunities for other teams to join in. So I think in general would be great to have, for example, in Paris, Into the Breach, that story of a team going in that came from probably not going to be invited to an event, but then building up. So us providing those events so teams like them could join and eventually get into a major. Yep.
But as for Vitality, maybe it's much better to have partnerships and be more stable and be able to plan everything for at least few months.
Yeah, I mean, these partnerships came about, 2018, 2019 is when they started the world that we know today. And what we're doing now is essentially removing that security on paper, right? I'll get to that. So of course, in the first moment, that's not so great. But when we plan with business, we of course do a performance, let's call it forecast or expectation, or I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I invest a certain amount of money in my roster and focus and energy. So I'm going to need a certain amount of return. Sure, you can't guarantee performance, but my expectation is to be in the top 10 in the next years, no questions asked. And that in itself will mean that there will be a world where there will be partnership-like, I want to say, things. Not that there will be anything allowed to be signed on a paper, but if you're a good team, you will be playing at the big events, right? Because the ranking makes it. So not knowing what next year will look like, but I'm assuming the world's not going to completely reinvent the ball and, I don't know, we do 20 majors. That's not going to happen. So I'm expecting to participate in the big events. And the big events will still have big prize pools, and the big events will still have, I hope, some revenue share. The question is how good that revenue share will be and how much you can anticipate that. That, of course, is something that we as teams are very interested in, right, you guys? But I do think, if you think further, even for TOs, there is this interest in sharing this revenue with the industry, because otherwise these teams will not be able to afford these players, and then they lose their raison d'être, right? If there are no big teams play at Blast and EFG, ergo bad for everyone. So something will be given, but yes, of course, for the board, it's not that great to hear, hey, that guaranteed money is gone. And it's not that nice for us to have to share pots with teams that maybe, see, I get it. Teams come to big events. We love the underdog story. That's great. However, if suddenly at an event there's 5 underdogs that nobody expected it, chances are they're not going to bring a lot of viewership. They're not going to bring any sponsoring. They're not going to bring a lot of just traffic locally for the event, so not a lot of money. And even if they bring eyeballs, not the same as a big team would, which means that a lot of parties will lose out, and the teams that are investing a big bucks and are there are not getting their share of what they're investing. So that will work short term, not long term. But I do think that will regulate itself over a while, because the big players, the better players, will essentially be in the teams that will be ranked high, that will participate. So it's just maybe 1 or 2 more teams will pop up. That's it.
Yeah, it's obviously it's not the change any of us asked for, but it's what Baba put in place, and we have to evolve, and it's the next evolution of the professional Counter-Strike scene. I think, to Anne's point, the big players, hopefully ourselves as TOs and yourselves and others as teams, will still be able to be the big players. We're announcing our plan for next year tomorrow, which has the formats and the kind of the financial incentives, which is the intention that allows teams to plan. So as your analogy there, you can go, we are a top 10 team, you obviously want to be higher than that, but I can pretty much guarantee that, or we should be. You can build a plan on that, you can model on that. It also gives that opportunity for a team that might be 40th in the world to have a clear track for aspiration. Our formats at the moment have, on paper, had an aspirational route through, but it was a pretty narrow needle you've got to thread yourself through. And that, you guys are more open in that, but that is probably the wrong move for developing a wider base of an ecosystem when you haven't had maybe like academy teams. If you'd had a really good academy team structure working, maybe that could have worked, because there is still a development pathway for talent and structures through. So whereas now you're probably, guessing you might see less academy teams, but what you'll see is people picking up talent bases from a tier 2 team that will ping their way through.
Sorry, but this is exactly it. Because if you look at this in other games, let's compare this to other TOs, other games, academy leagues and systems exist where there is not an open path up. Because you cannot, how can we run an academy team if theoretically said team could compete at the same events? Or if my main team has, I don't know, a sickness and like misses a tier 1 event, and my academy team pops off, and then suddenly they're battling for the same event, and that doesn't work because competitive integrity, yada, yada. So that, I think, is a big point that needs to be addressed in the future, and maybe will somewhat get addressed by TOs that will not participate in the tier 1 circuit, or will not, or maybe even like you guys fielding a secondary set or whatever, can be the same TO but different event, where there is no path from this to this, right? So maybe that can work, but I think the only solution is that you partner with another team, but you simply can't field 2. If there is a pathway for your academy team to one day be at the same tournament, no matter how unlikely that play-in is, you simply can't do it. There's no business case for it. And that's sad, I think, for the player base and the development.
I think from our side, like, we do have quite a few leagues that do have this sort of structure. I think Big was one of the cases. They always used to play in the Meisterschaft with like an academy team, and then that qualified into IEM Cologne. So we'd always have the question of, if they got to the final, how do they qualify in? Is it the case that Big doesn't even get the invite in the end, and then the academy team qualifies, or they both get the invite, and then by the end of the Meisterschaft League, they have to sacrifice that invite or choose which team they want to send? It just becomes really messy, and once again, it comes to competitive integrity. So, but yeah, it's not straightforward. I think if there was the kind of 2-league structure where there's not an advancement and there was a section there, I think WePlay had a really nice setup of what they did previously when they just had an academy league altogether. There's nothing they led into, and provided something for academies to be there. That was really nice for that. But I think, yeah, with the open ecosystem, it just doesn't work, because there's always going to be a way of coming up.
I think there's a subtle part in the changes of RALs next year where actually it's rosters that are invited, as it is technically for the majors currently. So actually in our structure at the moment, if you had that sort of academy team that were bubbling under, actually Vitality have the invite for that event. You can field who you want. When you have a roster lot, you can submit that. So actually the current structures allow for that fluidity. They don't into the future, which I think you'll get. Maybe academy teams dying off, and maybe you'll have a better proliferation of those smaller teams. I think one of the fundamental points of next year, I think we'll actually work closer with teams. Not that we haven't been working closely when you've been members, but it's a different commercial structure and a different operational relationship. Whereas into next year, that's a stakeholder that we're essentially selling a product to. I'm trying to make sure that you prioritize my tournaments and bring your A game to that and are playing at that. So we've got to make sure we are providing the right conditions, we're providing the right experience, bits of financial security. And so I think we'll have a relationship with a wider set of teams in a more meaningful way into next year, which hopefully is only a good thing if there's elements of best practice sharing, understanding, and rising tides, rising all ships and stuff.
How hard it will be for you to expect top ranking teams to perform in your tournaments? Because right now it will be other also good names on in the industry. Where, I forgot English. Oh my God! So next year there will be so many events and new names also in the industry who would like to have some events as well. How would you approach this situation to have the best teams performing in your tournaments?
Yes, Andrew, how? Can you give a sneak peek? No?
Maybe I could. All of that will be announced tomorrow. We've got, obviously, we've been working with you on it. We've got a really robust, clear plan, I think, that incentivizes teams. It gives them clarity of their commercial planning and rewards that loyalty as well. We've got really exciting, compelling tournaments as well that are different storylines. I don't think the world benefits in any way, shape or form by having 25 tier 1 tournaments that have exactly the same format and exactly the same teams. If everybody says everything is the biggest tournament in the world, then by that fact, none of them are. So actually, what you'll see in some of our structures tomorrow is a variety of kind of formats and structures. I love all of them, but some people may not like some of them. I think they'll all give a unique storytelling and excitement to them. I think you will, hopefully, it's unrealistic for teams to play the number of tournaments that are out there next year. That doesn't mean all the tournaments out next year won't be great. They will, because there's 50, 60, 70 teams out there. We only engage at the top ends of our businesses with a smaller proportion of those. So there'll be some great storylines, and you will see teams rise up and get their chances. We've got Saw playing, just sadly been knocked out, but we're playing in our tournament, haven't played in one of our big finals for a while. You've seen some great stories across the latest big events. 9Z did really well at Dallas, wasn't it? Yeah. So those teams will get more opportunities. Mongols now will be playing at some of our biggest events. That is good for the ecosystem. You want to make sure you've made it compelling for people to prioritize ours. I think if you are clear with the structures, which is what we're doing tomorrow, clear with the financial structures and the locations and the planning, you are able to plan out where that structure goes. I would like to think that gets a loyalty from teams, and that then if they aren't in those certain ranking positions, then they would pick something else, but only if they happen to be at that point in time.
From my side, I'm quite lucky in regards to my role at EFG of that I don't have to negotiate too much in these high-level conversations as much as Andrew does. So I have a team above me that looks after most of those things.
Just can say yes.
But generally,
I agree.
Yeah, he makes really good points. But generally, I find that also TO's communication between each other has got much better over the years, and sort of working together, finding the ways to work the calendar. I think we've got ahead of schedule a lot more as well now. We're announcing qualifiers, our dates. We're building schedules together, which I think at one point, probably a few years ago, wasn't as fluid. So yeah, I think that's just a big improvement there.
Maybe I can speak from team side why for team, or at least Vitality, I don't know how it is for you, there is a certain benefit also to working closer with the TOs, and not saying you're going to exclusively attend those events, but maybe prioritizing them, or I don't know, putting, just more focus on them. One is, there's so many events. You guys have been to a lot of them. You've done this for years. Remember the really shitty ones, because those stay in your head, and you want to avoid those again. Usually, we try to go and repeat to go to events where we have a good experience, where the operations work, where the players can have good performance, where the crowd's good, where et cetera, where they tick the box. Now, there are certain players in the industry that we know with this, and perhaps maybe tomorrow a new, I don't know, company enters the playing field and comes, here's the next big thing, like maybe EWC, right? Like something like this comes and you can't ignore it. But that doesn't mean that your relationship with the others will just be forgotten, and you know what you're going to get there. So that's a good base. Now, the benefit is also that we at least have been talking a lot with EFG and Blast for next year. Not saying that we decided on it, no, but that they at least listen to what do teams need, what do they expect, and like what would it take for us to continue working together, which of course doesn't guarantee our participation. Maybe I have bad performance and I don't even qualify for it, right? And then that conversation, well, I guess then congratulations to whoever took my slot, you're welcome. I did a lot of work for you. But for us, it's important to know who we're working with, then to be able to anticipate a little bit. And yeah, that schedule will be crazy next year. We've seen it already. It's nuts. From an ops perspective, performance-wise, you can do what, like 14 events a year? I think that's it. Like that's around 240 days on the road for the players and staff. That's the absolute max. If you do more, at that point, you're going to sacrifice your performance. You're not going to be able to deliver up to level 1, and then you're just going to drop in the standings, because participating in an event and doing badly is surely not better than going somewhere, winning it, and taking a week off, right? So yeah, for us, it's still very important to keep that relationship, to continue building it, to not go back to 2018 when we didn't talk to the TOs, but to do this jointly, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same industry. If they do well, we do well, and vice versa.
And I think, oh yeah, I like to jump in a bit on it. So, like, the question was, how do we make sure to get like the best teams in our events? Correct?
Again?
The question was, how do you make sure to get the best teams to your events? Yeah. So I can't really speak on getting like the very, very best teams, because right now we haven't been able to do it. Either it is because of franchises or because we can't put up that much prize money. But what we do and what we focus on, and it's something that Blast does, not only because Andrew is here on the panel, but like we focus on player experience and having like unreasonable hospitality, right? So whoever comes to our events, likes our events, wants to come back to our events, and that's what we will be focusing on. Of course, we're a bit excited because having all those events and having different ways to rank up might mean that some of the top teams actually play some of our events as well, because it might give points. And I don't mean like the very, very top teams, but those teams are trying to get into the top 32, right? So focus a lot on player experience would be mine, because as Anne says, you do remember, and as an ex-player, you do remember the good events that you go and how you were treated and why you want to come back.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit, go back to sort of almost the point earlier about long-term planning that both we want from Valve and that we're doing, and we're speaking to all TOs, like, because we're a stage still in, thankfully, in CS2 where we're growing the pie, so therefore we should be working on that rather than fighting over our slice. When it gets to that point, we might have a different relationship with everybody, but we are still a growing, hugely growing ecosystem, growing fan base, growing player base. That's good news for us all commercially. So the more we can look ahead, the more we can be working on calendars for 26, you know, even now, like, which seems to some people and some different esports ecosystems, that's so far away from their thinking. If we're able to do that, we're able to plan and build structures and look at, you know, swings maybe like you see in the tennis circuit. You have a North American swing of the tournaments. You have a Southern European clay court swing. Like, there's no point you putting Chengdu on the, you know, like a week after me putting on Washington. Like, it's not always possible by venue availability or commercial relationships, but let's try and have those conversations. So I give you a better chance of saying yes to my event, rather than kind of head in the sand and just hoping you will.
During Counter-Strike Global Offensive era, we had some academy league that it's, I think, also built so many good talents right now for us that it's like right performing in the top level in top teams. Do you think it's also a good idea to implement it for Counter-Strike 2? To also have some kind of place or platform where we can like build new talents? Or all these tournaments that we still will see next year will help with this? And we don't need to focus on academy players.
Is that just for me, or is that for the...
For everybody, because they maybe will need to build these tournaments.
Why don't you start this time around?
You just repeat the part of the question.
What?
Repeat the question. I think at the end of the question.
Sometimes I also don't hear you. So, like before, like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, we had some like leagues where were like academy leagues just for academy players. makes sense to have it in Counter-Strike 2 as well.
Academy
To
League.
build, because like
Academy
now
League
these
and
players-
CS2.
because right now these players playing also in the
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, once again, adding academy leagues, just because of the conflict of interest, does have that problem, that it will always be that league stays where it is. I think it's hard when it goes to, or you just block any form of progression in anything. It's just complicated. But I do think we get talents and stuff come through other methods, like all the challenger leagues and other teams. I think some teams do sometimes get seen as like academy teams for other teams, i.e. FaZe Clan taking a lot of Mouse players every so often, and sort of the way things progress that way. Or you've got things like FACEIT, you've got things like Challenger League and stuff within our ecosystem where you do start to find talent. Academy leagues, I just think they're very complicated, and I think just the conflict of interest alone is just the biggest part of where I think it would get blocked in most cases.
And again, like, there's a difference of maybe what I think as a fan rather than a TO. As a TO, they are like, they're quite hard to make sense of commercially. Let's just be honest on that. As a fan, I think we talked about how do you bring talent up, and does this new ecosystem give more opportunity because there's a cleaner route for talent up. You will still have the big brands, and you will still, the Vitalities, the OGs, and FaZes of the world. If you're a young, up-and-coming player, you're still probably aspiring to get on one of those rosters. So it's how do you showcase yourself and do that. You see it in traditional sports. Take football. Does a player playing in League One actually prepare them for the Premiership? Or actually are they better prepared being in an academy for the Premiership, hardly ever playing, but occasionally playing a cup game, and then they break through that way? There's no kind of right answer. Like talent, people in any sport, people evolve talent at different paces. You do want to make sure that pathway is there, because we want that. We want great talent on our stages. You want to be able to sign great talent. I'm not sure there's a solution for that. It might be an interesting one if that's where Valve ever could get more involved, of how do they see that, or whether that's a unified cross-ecosystem piece. They're challenging when there's many tournament operators working in the space.
Yeah, I think from Vitality perspective, academies are immensely important, and that might sound silly right now because we don't have one. But there's a reason for that, because currently the setup is really tricky for it. But there are two ways to build rosters like we have. One, buy really expensive good players and hope it slots together. Or two, kind of like grassroots them up, foster them. It's not often that you get a chance to sign someone very young, very inexperienced, and to make them grow within your roster for full duration. Like Zaiwu's story in Vitality is great, and we love that, and we would love to replicate that and nurture talent like this. But gotta also admit that this was a lucky moment and a lucky point in time, and that nowadays this will not just happen. Like, look, Munesi, he came via Navi to G2. And the Academy Navi, right? So I think there definitely needs to be a pathway for Academy for big teams to stay viable, because otherwise what will happen is we're just going to explode salaries. We're going to put a huge financial burden on teams. However, it's the chicken and egg, right? Yes, it's not commercially really viable. Yes, running events like this, super expensive. You see it in the Academy League, you see it in the female scene. You can actually compare that
Female scene, I want to cry now.
Exactly. You can compare it one-to-one. I don't fault the TOs for it, because I do understand how it's come. I mean, that's why we don't have one, because commercially it's just not that viable right now. And at the end of the day, we are a business first, and we need to be able to pay our bills. And if we can't afford a team, well, there you go. But I think long-term, longevity-wise, for the industry, it would be much better to have a healthy academy system where they get small events to experience this, where we also have a way of educating players earlier on, and not just talking performance in-game. I'm talking how to handle media presence, to have a better, presentation of their own brand, of the organization, of the tournament that they are participating in, to do better interviews and to do better in sponsored content. Because at the end, that's what makes the money, right? And the media rights. So it's very short term to say, oh, right now we can't invest. So someone needs to invest in academies. Who is going to be that person to start? Well, right now, everybody's just kind of looking in a
Maybe
circle and
it will
going,
be
you. Exactly. And that's exactly where we're at. So chicken and egg. I think we all agree it's important, but nobody can make that first step, and that's the big crux of the situation.
Is there a different way of looking at this? You did a very good job a couple of years ago. Well, you do very good job all the time, but a couple of good years ago was Vitality of playing with 6, 7-man rosters. And I, as a fan and a broadcaster, was like, that's great. When I first got into this from a non-endemic world, I couldn't understand the no substitutes concept. But you, and is that, you and Astralis did it quite well, even on occasions, certain maps within a match. Is that in a world of that conflicted potential calendar of TOs next year where you say, right, you can play 16 events. Could Vitality play 18, but you use 7 players as a roster throughout that allows you to blood and test new talent? I think the challenge is, and you'll know it better, the player mindset and culture is incompatible with that probably currently.
It's that and just the sheer cost. Because at that point, you need not 5 top-tier players, but 7. 7 that are so good that they can actually be interchanged on roles, which, like, for those who really know the game, like, there's maybe 2 or 3 people you can, at any given point in time, look up to exchange that role you're having in that player. So, I mean, ask G2 yesterday, huh? Or maybe even today. Look what happened. Monesi didn't have the visa, and there you go. And
he's in the country now.
Yeah. I hear that. So, cool idea. I agree. I would love that. Coming from traditional sports, saying, why don't we have more subs? Yeah. That could maybe work on, let's call it tier 2 level, where you have more time, where you don't have that pressure of the schedule, where it's also more online, where there is more practice, and you're not that punished that quickly for little mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes. But yeah, on the top level, like, you're not gonna come to race day with your backup driver. You're just not gonna.
I think the ecosystem's not open to it right now either, with the way that Valve structure the rules for the major. Because previously, obviously, Team Vitality had the multi-team roster when you had Shocks and can't remember the other player that was switching in and out on roles and stuff. That you guys had a 7-team roster at one point. And then I think Valve restricted the rules down on majors where it was just 6 people registered, 5 players, 1 coach, and then you could only sub your coach in if you needed to, which then kind of ruled out the rules of going for multi-team rosters. So I think that's probably the biggest struggle, because I think we were getting there, and I think our rule books still align in the sense of someone could register up to 10 players, there can be substitute, you could build your roster around that, but obviously one of the biggest moments in a CS calendar is a major, and I think every team wants to be there.
It's that, and then the little teeny tiny fact that, like, TOs cover 6 to 7 people traveling on site. Now, if you want to field your 8-man, 9-man roster, that's the org organizing that, the visa, the travel, the hotel, the I don't know what. Sounds silly. Operationally, on a year, we're talking 200, 300 grand just on top. Easy for an org to maybe have a shot at playing 1 or 2 tournaments more. And that's only the operational cost, not the salary cost, right?
I have a proposal there. I mean, we mostly focus on the tier 2. That's where the academies lie, right? So, and there's different ways to run an ecosystem, right? Like, we have the Riot model, it's very closed. It's very strict. Who's in tier 1, who's in tier 2, and how you ascend. And academies can win tier 2, but they cannot go and be in tier 1. And then you have the opposite here with Counter-Strike, which is completely open, and nothing stops the academy from being even higher tier than the top team. So what can happen here, and it wouldn't make sense on, like as you said, and having the academy team for Vitality, because it's already Vitality and how the ecosystem works doesn't make sense. But what can happen here is, like, maybe those top 10 teams can have alliances with, you know, a top 60, top 70 team, and then that way you don't have to absorb all the commercial hurdles and of having a team, but then there's something that you can lend players from the top 10 team to that 60 team and see how that
so kind of like what Valorant's doing, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it's a cool idea in theory, and I loved it when Riot introduced that. I don't know if you guys are aware of it. It's so basically in Valorant, there's this option to have a partner team in the Academy League, which means they're kind of like your backup roster. However, they are signed with the other team, they wear the other team's merch, they're playing in that thing, but if you need a sub, you can pull them from their team without, because there's things like global contract databases, roster locks are like seasonal, not tournament-wise, etc.
So there's no ownership like the Man City structure, say, with Red Bull New York or anything? It is.
No, it's not that. I mean, you can do that if you want to, but it's not necessary. Really cool idea. Hard to replicate, I think, in Counter-Strike, since roster locks are tournament-wise. They're not seasonal, these things. But also, we thought about this at Vitality, actually, with Valorant. And then you get complication and challenges in step 2. Things that you might not think about in step 1. First reaction is grand. We get cheap academy players, like basically, and the academy people get a chance to play tier 1. How awesome. And then you start thinking, well, but the sponsors that are paying for the roster are locked on other things. And maybe there's even a competing sponsor between the teams, like, I don't know, a different chair, different banking company. Then the schedule is locked in, and then maybe there's a visa, and then that guy can't come, and then they don't train together. So that means that coaching staff has to align the philosophies. You know this as ex-players. You can't just be like, this guy's good, take him. They need to have the same callings, they need to have the same abbreviations, they need to have the same practice schedule, they need to have the same team culture, or at least somewhat similar. And for that, you need to work so closely together, because otherwise, if you don't do that, then you don't get anywhere, which means at the end of the day, it's the big org calling all the shots, because at the end of the day, you need to fit it into their system, which means it's the extra work for them, the extra cost for them, and then they don't even have the guarantee of having the player later on. So it's, yeah. You can tell I thought about this a little bit. I would love to have an academy.
I do wonder, actually, if the idea of almost that semi-partner team relation might be possible in this new ecosystem. I might be over-analysing it, but I imagine when you've got the majors that are going to now fall at the end of, essentially, a 6-month season, will you end up with a de facto transfer window in that player break? Whereas now with the majors kind of halfway through sometimes a season, you don't. You end up with some rosters ready to make changes because they didn't do as well as they wanted, others holding on. And we've had this at tournaments where, we know that's a dead roster, as it's been phrased, and you're like, well, I can't change my roster lock, it's unfair to other teams, that we're just going to have to play that out. I wonder if you will get a slightly more structured transfer window, and therefore that opportunity for you to go, great, I'm going to pick endpoint just because I saw them earlier, and go, we'll have a relationship with them and see if that's a route through.
I think that's something you could add to the wish list for Counter-Strike, no? Like roster locks that go across all tournaments. I do believe it might actually make life for you guys also easier, because you wouldn't have to every single event send out these things and buy X and I don't know, but
cheaper flights, less reservist, all of that stuff.
Easier. And sure, maybe that means you have to play 1 or 2 events with a dead roster as orgs, but at least you have the anticipation of the cost, of the changes, of all the things. And even performance-wise, you can change that approach and more of a like, okay, we have to play the next 4 months together, so strap in, boys. I mean, other games do that. Basically, every other esports has that. That's team-based, besides Counter-Strike.
The more I think about it, I think that is, I'm going to add that to our wish from earlier, like a seasonal roster lock, as long as you maybe get your 6 in there. Yep. Then that's, if we can recut the whole rule, then we'd like that, please.
So we would like to add that to the wish list. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting to listen to you guys. Do we have any questions?
Oh yeah, the really
I think there
noisy.
is some right. Nice haircut.
Is one of them now than everyone else?
Just do it. Just
No.
Right.
Okay, questions time. Who wants me to run around like a performing monkey?
Any questions?
There we go. There's my first. Patient.
It helps with.
Hi, Pete from Endpoint here. So we're probably one of the ones you'd class as a feeder team. Yeah, I agree with what some of the stuff you say. I think the comment about Tier 2 being easier to have a 6-7 man roster, it would make sense if you had those roster locks and you could take from them, but Tier 2 is actually more rammed than Tier 1. If you want to get up, you're playing every single week. You're not doing the traveling, which is a big help, but at your point to 200-300k for just adding an extra player, you could pick the best player in tier 2 that's actually performed and just take them anyway for less than that. So
no, 200k, not salary. I'm talking operational cost.
Travels, exactly, yeah. So salary on top is way more. You could then go, as long as you've got good scouts, it's worth investing in. You just pick the best players from tier 2 for way more. But
all right, I get you. Yeah. No, you're completely right.
So the academy model in Counter-Strike just doesn't work. We tried it as well. It doesn't work.
Correct.
Fully agree. Yeah, I mean, in terms of from Blast, it'd be nice to know if you have any more plans, because you used to do the Blast Risings. It'd be really nice to know if you have any plans for that coming back, or because they were great for tier 2 as well, and going into the tier 1 scene and so on. So yeah,
You might enjoy tomorrow's announcement.
perfect. Let's go. Cool.
All right, more questions. Who's going to make me get out of this comfy seat? There it is.
Can I get two? Can I get two questions?
Yeah, you know what?
Okay, cool. So the first one is for Michael and Andrew regarding the next year's calendar, which you guys were saying that's pretty crazy, right? So in the last couple of years, you both, as ESL and Blast, have maybe, besides the majors, which jump around a bit, have split the tier 1 calendar mostly with good success from both organizations. Now with 2 more players joining next year,
Not only 2.
Yeah, well, StarLadder and PGL at least have announced to be doing Counter-Strike regularly again for next year. Do you guys believe that there's room, both in terms of viewership and in terms of sponsorship, for a packed calendar for 2025?
I think it comes down to that the ecosystem next year is going to change. With more competitors coming in, with the new system that Valve's going to introduce and stuff, everything's going to change, especially for teams, for TOs. And I think that's a planning phase that we're still going through at the moment, of like looking at how to integrate everything into the calendar altogether. I think, like we've mentioned on the stage here today, there's systems that we're going to look at to try and get teams to come to certain tournaments. Obviously, how Valve's rankings work and stuff will seem to structure how we are. But I think there is space, and I think it's going to create a more open ecosystem going forward. But yeah, generally, I think it's just a working process at the moment. I think you will see more with what you guys are announcing tomorrow, and we'll be looking to announce stuff later in the year as well.
Yeah, it's great that TOs are interested in the Counter-Strike scene. That means, helps us validate that we are in the right business here. So I think that's a good as a starting point. As we've talked a number of times on here, it's a very congested year. We will look to incentivize teams to prioritize our events, and we're really excited about the propositions we're sharing with everybody tomorrow. I think not every event in that calendar next year will be the pinnacle. So you will get ones that end up being tier 1 events. Some of them may be tier 1.5. Some of them may be actually in a location that is really building out a relationship. Say someone puts something on in South America. That might be, well, actually, there's only 3 or 4 teams traveling from Europe, but it's really built out a regional, continental tournament. So there's a way that I think people can build out a variety of storylines. I think the sponsors will always be attracted to tournaments that provide the best proposition for them. That's the eyeballs, the viewership to teams. I think one of the risks Anne talked about earlier is it's great from a sporting meritocratic point of view that the right teams get their positions, but they don't always bring the eyeballs. Like, I could pick 5 teams that I would want at every tournament, and then I can have anybody else, and my broadcasters would be happy, I'd be happy. That is a risk you have in this new world. But I think that's an opportunity for other brands to grow. And as much as this keeps the TOs on our toes, it might keep the brands on their toes as well, of making sure they control that fan base and deliver that.
Thank you. And the second one for Anne and perhaps Vlady as well. On the team side, you were saying that you pick and choose like 14 tournaments over the calendar year to attend. how is the decision process? How does the decision process work within the organization on which 14 you pick and choose? And now that the major is the last of each season, with some of these tournaments lasting longer than a week or two, don't you think that maybe the team will reach the major a bit spent physically and mentally?
Yeah, well, so until now, there was not a lot of picking, right? Until now, there was partner leagues, and you're in them or not, and you get penalized for declining more than one invite or something like that. So there's your answer for until now. Next year, I don't think it will be that different. There will be, sure, more things offered from 4 TOs instead of 2 or 3. But at the end of the day, you can only do X amount of tournaments, and usually what that does, and if you look at the schedule the way it is now, that means certain things will always overlap, and then you just have to make a choice. And at that point, there's 2 factors: competitive, what other teams are we expecting to go there? We'll speak to other orgs, we'll see, hey, are all of the people that we consider to be in the top 10 going to this one? If the answer is no, well then we're sure as hell not going there, comma, unless the business is really good. So if that event pays for half my Counter-Strike year, of course I'm gonna, talk to my players and say, guys, bite the bullet, let's go. But I do think that we've matured enough in the market that the opportunity cost of not going to an event and perhaps losing out on the revenue because of that makes you want to continue going. Like, for example, if you have to go to EFG events for smaller ones to get the points and then qualify into the next big one, and it's a cut-off dates in the ranking, right? That will be interesting. So for us, it will be which dates are we going to, where are we going to, how much money does it pay, and who are we playing against? And then it doesn't matter if it's a 1 or 2 week tournament. At the end of the day, 230, 240 days is on the road what we can do. If we go above that, we're going to start cutting. Very simple.
Do you want to answer?
I think it was for you, a team question.
I mean, yes. I think it depends on what kind of level your team is. So probably if you're starting from a lower level, you will grind and play all events as you can. And before it was of course better for us because we were still partners with Blast. So it's give us some kind of safeness and you could plan. And next year it would be probably more chaotic than it was previously. For some other teams who had also partnership with CSL, it was even better than for us. But at least these 2 events per year, we could plan around them and could understand, okay, we will start from a Blast, for example, or Blast will be a little bit in a month or something. So it was much better for us to plan around. Right now, it's so hard to understand what will be next year, and also because system to be part of a major changed as well. Now ranking is so important, so probably you need to focus so much, playing so many events, and get as many points as you can. Again, depends on your level of your team. Of course, when you getting better and you more, believe in your skill in your team more, then you can, of course, probably it's easier for you to skip some events. But at the same time, everything can happen. Player can get sick, something happen with the visa, something else. So maybe you okay, I want to perform my best during this event, and then you go into the event and something going on and you couldn't, because it's lottery still, you can be sure about your results and your skill and everything, but it's still team game. It's not only one player. So unfortunately, yeah, it's given us some kind of anxiety about next year, but we will survive as always. I'm in esports since Counter-Strike 1.6. It always was survival, so we will survive. And I think our time is over, unfortunately, but we still can catch up if someone wants.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. You've all been absolutely wonderful. I know it's a few people getting ready to raise their hands. Reach out to them, go talk to them. They're here, use them. But thank you.